Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
Okay, welcome everybody once again to another edition of Learn Photography with Duck. As usual, I'm your host, Duck. Thank you for joining me. Today is Q&A, and we're actually going to be answering a question that came across my Facebook page from Karen Schwartzer. And I was kind of hoping that she'd be here. I told her I was going to answer it last month. She replied back, "I'm sorry, I'm not going to be around." So I said, all right, well, I'll hold it off a month. So Karen, this one's for you. She asked if I had any tips or tricks or suggestions about photographing the upcoming solar eclipse, which is coming up April 8th of this year. So that's what I'm going to be covering today. But before I do that, what I want to do is just go over very quickly a couple of things that are coming up, specifically through CTPPA. I'm mentioning this because it might be of interest to some of you. This month on the 28th, we're going to have a speaker come in. It's going to be a Zoom event. And the topic is going to be all about copyright and what you should know as a photographer about copyright on your work. So if you sell your work, if you show your work, this might be something worth looking into and seeing if you want to brush up about what the current laws are. He might even talk about where the current law is heading. And I think he might even be touching upon, a little bit upon the artificial intelligence image generation and what that's doing to the copyright landscape. So it might be of interest, if like I said, if you are a photographer that likes to sell your work in any format, whether it's through selling art prints, selling it commercially, publishing a book for sale, things like that. So anyway, secondly, somebody have a question? Okay. Secondly, next month I'm going to be doing a a little chat on Zoom. Also, it's a how to take your photos from drab to brag, basically how to take your photos to that next level. And you've heard me talk about it here on this particular, Learn Photography with Duck in the past, teaching you techniques and teaching you ways of looking at your photographs in order to enhance them, in order to bring out some of the inner beauty that may be lost in translation. So I'm going to be doing, pretty much just an overall cover of a lot of stuff that you've heard me talk about here. So if you're interested, join us. You need to register through ctppa.com. If you're not a member, unfortunately, there's a little bit of a cost. I think it's, I don't know, $20 or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, so if you're interested, in either of those topics, check it out. Just passing the word out. Okay. So anybody interested in photographing the eclipse? No, not really. Yes, maybe.
Yeah, I've thought of it many times, but I like to find out the process though.
Okay. So this year there are actually 5 eclipses. There's going to be 2 solar eclipses and 3 lunar eclipses. Unfortunately, the majority of them are not going to be, relevant to our location geographically, except the full solar eclipse is it full? Yeah, full solar eclipse coming up on April 8th. Now, if you stay here in Connecticut, it might not be a complete full eclipse for you, right? Because as with anything, there is a parallax. And if you're not in a prime location, then you're going to be seeing the eclipse at a slight angle, and that means that a sliver of the sun is going to be visible on one edge of as the moon comes across. In order to view it perfectly, you need to position yourself geographically in a prime spot, and that's basically along the path of travel where the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun line up perfectly. Okay, so 90-degree angle from the Earth to the Moon, and then to the Sun, and that happens fairly close to us. And let me share a map. This particular map, this is from eclipse2024.org. And I think I found this link on the NASA site. Of course, if you want to know anything about space, just visit the NASA site. And they have a bunch of articles about the upcoming eclipse. But if you go to here, I don't know, let me copy that. I'll drop it into the chat. All right, let's see. Where's the chat? Where's the chat? There it is. Okay, so that's this site here. And what it is it maps the route of travel that the sun or the eclipse is going to follow across the surface of the Earth. And we're down here in Connecticut, so you see that we're quite a distance. That's why I said from our position down here, we're going to be south of the line of travel. So we're probably going to end up getting a little sliver of the sun peeking around the moon. If you want, a nice, clean, crisp solar eclipse, then you need to be somewhere within this red band, which is a pretty wide expanse of geography in order to position yourself. But obviously where the blue line is, that's the optimal. All right, so if we take a ride up to Burlington or Plattsburgh, any of those areas up there in Vermont, that's probably the closest from us here. I've talked to a couple people that they said, I'm going to be up in Maine during that time, so I'll catch it up in Maine. So visit this website, and it will give you, some suitable locations where you can photograph the eclipse.
Hey, Doug.
Yeah.
Darlene Whitmore, Joe Whitmore. Yeah, why? She made reservations for a motel a long time ago and got a good price. And then some time ago, they canceled it. Apparently, these guys are gouging or price gouging. Just my guess that they're price gouging. But anyways, people are saying there are no places to stay
Ooh.
where this eclipse is going to happen.
Well, you know what? That makes sense. That makes sense. Hey, it is a I wouldn't say once in a lifetime, but it doesn't happen very often where we are in a position where the solar eclipse happens very, very close to us. So as a business owner, yeah, I can see taking advantage of that.
I see the
Is it
blue line
right?
going through Rochester. A friend of mine lives there.
Mm-hmm.
He's into this, not as a photographer, but as being interested in astronomy.
Right.
And he said that is a primary location.
Yes.
And another mutual friend is going to go up to visit him.
Yeah.
for the-
Yeah. But if, if you have family or friends in some of these areas, that's great because you can always say, hey, can you put me up for the night? And it makes it a little bit easier. But travel wise, from Connecticut, it'll be faster to travel north into Vermont than to travel west
Yes.
into New York. I mean, from here to Buffalo, that's a hell of a haul, you know. Uh, and the thing is, with the time, the amount of time that the eclipse happens is literally minutes. Minutes. If you sneeze, you lose. Okay.
It's
Uh,
almost like trying to get an orange sunset around here.
yes, exactly, exactly. The sun, believe it or not, a lot of people, say, well, the day lasts so long, and then when it comes, I got plenty of time. And then when the sun starts setting, it's like, blink, you're out. So it's going to be the same way. People don't realize how fast the sun and the moon and the earth are actually traveling through space. So in actuality, let's see. I don't even remember what time. Did I write what time it's going to hit? All right, let me look it up. All right, so the next website I have is the also from NASA, the science.nasa.gov copy. I'll put that into the chat. This one is the timetable based on various key locations. So basically, you just got to find the closest location to you, and you'll be able to kind of figure it out. And it gives you, all right, like for example, here we are. The closest to us is probably going to be Burlington, Vermont, from us here. All right, so we have partial beginning. All right, the maximum, and then when the totality ends, and then when it starts, kind of going off the other end. So the whole thing lasts from 2:15 to about 4:30. All right. Now you say, well, Duck, you just said that it goes by really quick. This is it does. All right. But this is going from when the sun and the moon are starting to converge, okay, to when it actually converges and then they pass. All right. And that conversion happens really, really quickly. So if we look at the time when it starts, the conversion starts 3:26 to when it's at its maximum at 3:27 to when it now starts, separating again to 3:29. That's only 3 minutes. It's like 3.5 minutes of you only have 3.5 minutes to capture that solar eclipse. And if you look at some of the photos that people take, they usually take that before, where you get that little sliver, and then let me see if I can use this as a whiteboard. You get that big sliver, and then that little sliver, and then the complete eclipse, and then that little sliver coming the other end, and then the bigger sliver, and so on. So people like to composite these. So you need to have your camera ready for, being able to take a series of images, and you're going to be clicking them off in rapid succession during that 3 minutes. All right. But, from if we actually look at when the starts, the sun starts getting, close to the moon, or vice versa, it starts, a lot sooner. Okay, so you have a little bit of time as it ramps up to the eclipse, a very short window, and then a longer time as it ramps down. Okay. So we look at it, and like I said, the closest one to us here is in Burlington. So you want to get there ahead of 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's going to be done by about 4:30 in the evening. All right. Now, from here in Connecticut, where I'm down by the shore, down in Shelton, to Burlington, when I've driven it, it's a little over 3 hours. All right, so it's a bit of a haul, but not something that can't be done. So in essence, if you want to do it without an overnight stay, you can. Just give yourself plenty of travel time to get there ahead of time. All right. Then, after the eclipse is done, you pack up the car and you drive home. So 4:30, 5:30, 6:30, 7:30, 8. If traffic is bad, 8:30, you'll be home, have dinner, and go to bed. All right. So it can be done in a day. Obviously some people want to make an event of it, and in reality, when you are traveling, who likes to be rushed? So a lot of people take advantage of it and says, hey, let's make the day out of it, and let's go, check out the local scenery, check out what's up there, and stay the night, do a little bit more exploration, and then head home, by all means. But as Bill mentioned, yeah, you're going to get the people that are going to, really gouge the prices, and you're going to be competing with everybody else that wants to be in the area for taking advantage of that solar eclipse. All right, and it's not just photographers; it's all the astronomical people that just come out with their telescopes and and their binoculars and their all kinds of observation equipment. All right, they're going to be documenting it as well. So, all right. The next website that I want to share with you is MrEclipse.com. MrEclipse.com. I'll put that into the chat. There you go. All right. And this is one that some people had recommended to me as far as being able to get information about literally anything to do with solar and lunar eclipses, partial eclipses, full eclipses, annular eclipses, you name it. There's a ton of information. The design's a little outdated, it's a little tough to navigate, but if you spend a little time there, it's a treasure trove of information. And I actually filled in some of the information that was lacking, with me. This is not something that I do. All right. I was talking, I was talking with Alan beforehand, and he asked me if I was going to do the eclipse, and I go, no, it really, it holds no interest for me. I'll just live vicariously through everybody else's photos. Okay. But I have done a lot of photography shooting into the sun. All right. One of the things I love to do is photographing flowers with the sun behind the flowers. And I've done that quite a bit. So I can share some of the precautions that are required with your equipment and with your eyes when you have your camera pointed towards the sun. But if you're interested in doing this, I highly recommend, checking out this website. And, it's just a treasure trove of information. Okay. All right. So the first thing you need to consider when you are photographing anything where the camera's pointed towards the sun is safety. You don't look into the sun with your bare eyes. You definitely don't want to do it through a piece of glass that magnifies what is coming through it. Okay. Or in this case, a lens that not only magnifies but focuses the light into a very narrow path. It's a good way of burning out your retinas. Okay. And if we think about the kind of damage that it does to our eyes, you can just imagine the kind of damage that it can do to the internals of your camera. All right. Even if the shutter is closed and you don't have the light hitting directly onto your sensor, you have to realize it. All right. Here's an example. Have you ever taken a magnifying glass and you focus the sun onto something on the ground? Maybe a little piece of wood, and you just focus it until it starts smoking, and pretty soon that little piece of wood is going to burst into fire. It's the same thing with your camera lens. Your camera lens is focusing light to that plane that is your sensor. So if you leave it facing into the sun for too long, you can do a lot of damage. Not only the heat buildup, but the intensity into a point on your sensor or a point on your shutter, and you can kill your camera very, very, very simply. All right. So the first piece of kit that you need to get yourself for doing any kind of solar eclipse photography is a solar filter. All right. Now, in the past, I remember doing some research on this about 10 years ago. There weren't a lot of options in terms of optical protection for a camera when it came to solar eclipses. So a lot of people were hacking it by getting themselves a piece of welder's glass. The glass that goes into the helmets that welders use. They would take that and they would put that in front of their lens. The only problem is that it's not color calibrated to be a neutral color. Yes, it'll block out a lot of the light. Yes, it'll protect your lens, but then you're going to get this really nasty green color cast to your images. Okay. Well, over the years, they've developed, filters that are, similar in strength to those, goggles that welders use. And these are very, very, very intense, very, very dark pieces of glass that not 100% neutral, but close enough to be able to work with it. And these are ND 100,000, ND 1 million, ND 100,000, right? Solar filters. And as you can see, they're not cheap. Okay, they're not cheap, but they will protect your camera. They will allow you to keep your camera focused towards that solar eclipse and protect your lens and get, a suitably stopped down image of the solar eclipse, right? Um, so that's the first bit of kit you need, okay? Obviously, while you're setting everything up, you don't want to be looking at the sun, all right? You don't want to be, staring up. So you need to get yourself. And by the way, this is I just looked up Adorama. Any of the camera stores should be able to find these. Okay. But for your own personal protection, you're going to need to wear some kind of eyeglasses that will help block out a lot of that extra light. Now, the thing about these glasses is that they are not meant for looking at the sun. Okay? They're made for looking at the eclipse, during the eclipse. All right? So if you think about it, the eclipse is blocking the majority of the light coming from the sun, except maybe a little bit of a halo around it. All right? So the moon is actually going to be blocking a lot of the light, and whatever light comes through, while less intense, if you're looking at it directly, can still cause harm. All right? These will help reduce that harm, but they're not meant to look directly at a full sun. They're only meant to look at the eclipse. All right? So be warned. All right? Now, my concern is, well, obviously I have no experience with any of these. And if you look at them, they're very cheap paper goggles, very reminiscent of the 3D goggles you get at the movies, at the Cinemaplex when you go see one of those, cheesy 3D movies. They give you the 3D goggles. That's what these look like. And yeah, they're cardboard and a little thin piece of, mylar plastic with a protective, all right? But of course you can get, something that looks a little bit more heavy duty, all right? I would do some reading, make sure what you're getting is, appropriate for your needs. Don't cheap out and buy something that, may or may not work, all right? Because you are dealing with your eyes. You don't want to ruin your eyes, okay? So as you can see, there's a lot of people selling them in anticipation of the upcoming eclipse, all right? Now, they're selling these smartphone, I don't know if you can see it here, okay? Smartphone solar imaging enhancing photo lens for $8.99. Okay. I would be very cautious about that, simply because, well, just like the ones that are protecting your eyes, they're flimsy. They're designed only for during the eclipse, not for what's coming up to it. All right. So, buyer beware. All right. One little trick that some people use is that they'll make themselves a little, pinhole camera. And they'll use the pinhole camera as a means of keeping track of the eclipse. And if you never built a pinhole camera, it's just a box in order to darken the interior. And with a thumbtack, you just poke a little hole on the outside, point that towards the sun. The sun is going to do a projection onto the back part of the box. And as the moon crosses in front, you're actually going to see that shadow move across the projected light on the back of your pinhole camera. And it's very easy to make. You don't need any special equipment. And in reality, you probably don't even need a box. As you can see in this image, just placing the pinhole at a distance from another sheet of paper will allow you to focus that pin onto the second surface, right? And I don't know if you can see it here, but there really is a circle of light. And as the eclipse moves in, that you'll see the eclipse on that circle. All right. So it's a great way of observing. And of course, you can get creative. Any hole you make is going to project the eclipse. So you can have multiple projections. Okay. But it's a great way of tracking the eclipse without directly looking towards that light source. All right. So yes, you can do it without the use of special goggles. All right. Let me go ahead and get that link, Control V, into the chat. All right, and this is from the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratories. It's a little tutorial made for kids, you know, but hey, put it to use if you feel the need for it. Okay, just a little cardstock or cardboard, some aluminum foil in order to have a thin piece of material to poke a hole through, some tape, and a thumbtack is all you really need. Okay. All right. Whether you have a DSLR or a mirrorless is going to be you obviously have to take precautions on protecting your equipment. Okay. Obviously, if you have a mirrored camera, the mirror actually creates a layer of protection. All right. If you have a mirrorless camera, all right, what I would suggest is once you get on site and you set up and you're basically going to focus to infinity, and you're going to point it towards the sun. All right. And you have to realize that, you're going to be tracking the sun. So, you're going to have to make adjustments to your camera position. All right. But while it's just sitting there, keep the lens cover on. There's no need to have the light coming into the barrel of your lens and possibly causing some harm to your camera. All right. Use the longest lens possible that you have. The longest lens is going to allow you to fill the frame a little bit more, a little bit more. Just think about, anytime you've ever photographed the moon. You want to use something, 400, 500, 600 millimeters if you got it. If you have a extender, a 1.4 extender, or a 2x extender, throw it on there. Fill that frame. The thing is, whenever you use a long lens or when you use an extender, you're actually going to be losing light. But in this case, we're shooting right into the sun. So if we lose a couple of stops, it's only going to help you. All right, makes sense, right? Okay. Okay, and of course, if we think about gaining length on, or getting into something that's a little bit closer, a crop sensor over a full frame sensor camera is going to do you best. So if you have the ability to use a crop sensor, by all means, that's going to really, really fill the frame a little bit more. Okay. Once you get there, you're definitely going to need a tripod. Definitely need a tripod. All right. And the one thing that I suggest, if you're interested in doing any kind of astronomical work, whether it's eclipses or, either solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, you want to take a photo of the Milky Way, you want to take a photo of stars, you want to take a photo of the moon, you're definitely going to need a a tripod. But the thing is, you need a tripod that allows you to maneuver your camera without it flopping. So I usually say, ball heads aren't the best for astronomical type photography because you loosen one little knob and the whole thing flops. Okay. So it's not like a pan head where you loosen up one knob and you're able to, do a swing. All right. You loosen up one knob and you're able to do, up and down. Okay. Or what's called a fluid head, which is typical for like video work, which allows you to really, you can loosen the knobs, but there's still a lot of tension on that head that allows you to, with a little effort, reposition the camera, and then you just let go and it stays. All right. Unlike a ball head, my biggest issue with ball heads is, especially if you have a camera with a heavy front element, in this case, you're shooting with very, very long lenses. All right. So, when you put it on a tripod, you're not mounting the camera to the tripod, you're mounting the lens to the tripod and then mounting the camera to the lens. But either way, it tends to be a little bit heavy towards the front. So what I find with ball heads is if you aim it and then lock it down, there tends to be a little bit of a drop. All right. Once you lock it in, the camera just kind of settles and drops a little bit, and then you go, oh man, now you got to loosen it up, tilt it up a little bit above where you need to aim, lock it in, and then allow it to drop, and hope that when it drops, you're in position. So ball heads, yeah, they have its uses, but they're also not the most adequate tool for this kind of photography. So if you can borrow a fluid head, all right, or a pan and tilt head, by all means use that instead. All right. If all you have is a ball head, well, you use what you got. Okay. But just realize, that you're going to need to make adjustments as the eclipse occurs. Okay. My mantra when it comes to tripods is, if you're using a tripod, you're going to need a shutter release. Okay. So bring a shutter release with you. All right. It's going to make things easier. Okay. All right. As far as settings are concerned, okay. Definitely, if you can, you'll want to practice ahead of time, because if you're working with one of those, solar ND filters, once you put that filter on, your screen's going to be black. All right. You're not going to see nothing except maybe the point of light from the sun. Okay. So it becomes a little tricky in order to find your whatchamacallit, in order to find your framing. All right. But as far as settings go, start off at ISO 100. Bring it down to your lowest. If your camera can drop down below that, by all means, whatever your lowest ISO is on your camera, that's what you want to use. All right, because you're shooting straight into the sun. That's a lot of light that you need to cut out. All right, and you can only do so much with the camera settings. All right. So that said, a lot of people think, well, I have, my long lens has a range from, 5.6 to 22. All right. If I put it at 22, I'm cutting out a lot of light. All right. Which makes sense. All right. If you want to cut out light, you just close down your aperture. All right. The only problem is that there's a bit of a trade-off, especially if you're using a zoom lens. All right. Zoom lenses have a sweet spot. All right. And usually that sweet spot tends to be in the middle of whatever the range is. All right. So if you have a lens that goes, actually here, we'll do this. Okay. Oh, yeah, here we go. If you have a lens that has, 5.6 to 22, all right, the middle, which is the sweet spot, will be f11, right? So you want to be in that sweet spot. So whatever lens you're using, figure out what the extremes are, find that middle, that's going to be your sweet spot, all right? And that's going to be your go-to aperture setting for that lens, okay? And okay, and then you're going to, and then from there, all right, you're going to adjust your shutter accordingly, all right? And obviously it's going to change as the eclipse gets into totality, and then it's going to change again as it comes out of totality. So, you're going to need to be quick about it. You're going to need to be aware that your exposure is going to change as it progresses, okay? So when it comes to your shutter, obviously it's going to be probably pretty fast, all right? What it's going to be, I have no clue. I've never used an ND filter that strong, all right? All I know is, my experience with ND filters has always been long exposures, all right? So it's the opposite of shooting into the sun, all right, where, I'm trying to stretch my exposure by cutting out the light. In this case, we're cutting out the light so it's not doing damage to the camera, so that we're able to see a cleaner, clearer eclipse as the moon comes in front, all right? So we need to really cut a lot of that light. How much light? You're going to need to do a little bit of testing. So that's why I said, if you can, do some testing in advance and see what it takes. And then you'll have your starting point. And then as it progresses into the eclipse, then you know that you're going to start increasing your shutter length, all right? Making it a little bit slower, a little bit slower, a little bit slower, all right? But you have to be careful you don't go too slow, and then all of a sudden you're getting trails. I don't think that's going to happen, but, that's something to watch out for, all right? Right. The other oh, excuse me 1 second. Boy, when it gets you, it gets you. All right, the other thing in regards to aperture, all right, so I said you want to find that middle value of whatever the range is for your lens, okay? But if you understand any kind of night photography, or if you've done any kind of photographing stars at night, you might understand that if you do close up your lens to, whatever the maximum is, let's say it's f22 for your lens, this is where you start getting those starburst effects from these points of light. That may be something that you want. Who knows? Okay. For a solar eclipse, I don't know, how that will look, but you can give it a try. Just realize that as you close down, all right, what's causing the starburst effect is the number of blades that are used in your aperture in order to close it, all right? Some cameras have 7, some cameras have 9, it all depends, right? And that's where you get kind of like that hexagonal shape when you're really, really close down. As you get that hexagonal shape, you have those little corners of the hexagon. This is where a little bit more light is coming through than that circle of light. And that's what causes those radiating spikes of light. So it may be an effect that you want to build into your images. All right. Again, play around with it. See if that's something that attracts to you. Okay. All right, so I gave you the NASA sites. I gave you the Mr. Eclipse site, and that's pretty much it. The key thing: safety. Protect your eyes. All right, protect your camera. Get there in advance. Set yourself up. Be prepared to move quick during the eclipse moment. All right. And then just enjoy it. All right. All right. Any questions?
Yeah, parallel to this whole thing, you at the beginning you were talking about you took many pictures of flowers with the sun behind it.
Correct.
Let's relate to that a little bit, because that's more likely something I might use. In other words, if I'm shooting a flower with a sunlight, what's the procedure for that?
All right. Excuse me. All right. Let's see if I don't think I have those photos here. I think those are at home.
Well, even in theory, I'm like, do you open your f-stop or you close your f-stop?
Okay. All right. Yeah, hold on one second. Let me see if yeah, I don't.
Doc, let me chime in about something.
Yeah.
I remember years ago, I had an image to work with this client had given me, and it was a flower bloom, and that's what it looked like, that it was glowing from the inside, so that it appeared like the sun was behind it. But then it occurred to me, probably there's people that are out there that you can put a light behind it to get an effect if you're out there shooting. And when you first mentioned having the sun behind it, that's just like Ellen, that kind of caught my interest because I find myself taking a lot of photos of flowers. I don't plan on it, but there I am.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, I found not my best ones, but I did find one that's not I have here on my computer here, not the one at home. And all right. So here's one where I took it backlit. Excuse me. All right, and the thing that you're going to all right, so there's a few things that you need to be aware of, okay? You're shooting into the sun. So obviously protecting your sensor is key. So the thing is, whenever you're doing anything where you're shooting towards the sun, if you shoot where the sun is fully visible, that becomes the hot spot. Okay. So it tends to be a bit of a detriment to your composition, meaning that, if you have the sun, fully visible in the frame, your eye tends to kind of go towards that spot instead of where you actually want it. All right. So in this particular case, what we're looking to do is play with that theory. All right. So one of the fundamentals is our eyes tend to travel to our brightest areas first, and then, explore into the shadows. But when your subject is darker than your background, it kind of flips that, where now, because the background is so bright, we don't really go towards that bright spot. We now go towards the dark spot. All right. So there's a psychological flip with the way we view things like that. All right. But the other aspect of this is that we're using light to create interest. We're not using light to light our subject. All right, so there's a difference. All right, and this is a lesson that you might want to keep in your back pocket for taking your photography from here to here. All right, is if you can find interesting light, that will make your subject more interesting. All right, so rather than just using light to light your subject, you use light to interact with your subject. It makes it a little bit more interesting. Now, obviously, this example is not my best example. I have actual better ones. I just don't have them here available to me. All right. But what I do is I place myself in a position where the flower now becomes the moon in relation to the sun. All right. So in essence, I'm creating my own little eclipse here. All right. It's a little mini eclipse, except I'm using a flower instead of the moon to block out the sun. All right. And obviously the flower's a lot smaller than the moon, a lot closer. So I can't fully block out the sun. So what ends up happening is you might think of this more as an annular eclipse rather than a total eclipse. All right. And because the flowers tend to be very translucent, different flowers have different, transparencies to them, right? We can play around with how the light interacts with the background, or I'm sorry, how the light interacts with the petals. Okay. And there's a balance that you have to find with your camera settings, right? Now, the old adage is that your camera's meter is going to lie to you. Here's a perfect example of how your light meter is definitely going to lie to you. Okay, it's going to want to turn this into a much darker scene. It's going to want to cut out all that bright light that's coming down the barrel straight from the sun. I mean, you're shooting directly into the sun, all right? And in this case, let's see, the sun is actually like right here, okay? So I'm using the flower to block the actual physical sun, okay? And I'm using the light coming through the petals in a unique way. And I'm pretty much wide open. What are my settings here? 5.6, okay? So not quite fully open, all right? But you can see in the background here, all right, this is from a tree that was kind of like further back in my scene, and the leaves are creating this nice little bokeh effect, okay? And I thought that was kind of interesting, all right? But it's once you find your exposure, all right, because you're going to expose for your subject, all right, not for the light that's behind it. So everything behind is going to blow out. It's going to be overexposed, okay? And this is one where if I'm not a big fan of shooting with the little video screen in the back, but let me tell you, this is one of those times where shooting with the screen is going to actually help, all right? Because of parallax, all right? There is a slight parallax when you look through a viewfinder of a DSLR, and what you actually shoot. All right. So if as I'm looking through my camera, I'm actually kind of with my hand, I'm manipulating the flower. All right. It's still on the bush, right? But I'm kind of manipulating it, and I'm lining up the camera with the flower, and my whole body is able to line that up with the sun. Okay. And what I find is that I can get it looking perfect in my viewfinder, and I'll take a click and I'll look at it, and the sun is actually peeking through and blowing everything out. All right. So there's a little bit of a parallax. All right. Where what you see through the lens is not quite what the camera captures. So this is one of those instances where you might want to turn your back screen on and actually shoot and use the screen to kind of line things up, because it makes it a little bit easier. Okay. Not 100% perfect, but you know, I was shooting these pre-mirrorless, and I don't have a mirrorless, but mirrorless cameras, you can probably get much better results because it kind of removes that parallax effect. All right, so that's one of the things that you need to worry about, okay? But for this, what's important is not this. This is not important, okay? This is not important. What makes these shots interesting is what happens in the periphery, all right? Look at what the light is doing, how it's interacting with the petals, how it's interacting with anything behind, all right? Because that's what's really going to bring out the beauty of some of these backlit flower photos, all right? Not necessarily what's in front, all right? You're going to need to take a couple of shots. Let's see. Is that... let me see. I think I might have. All right. Oh, so here we go. Okay. First shot, grossly overexposed. All right. A little underexposed, a little bit more underexposed. Okay. And then this one here, this is processed. Is it processed? Nope. There it is. I got the proper exposure. Okay. So I get a little bit of translucency through those, you know, outer petals. Okay. Not much interest going on in the background. Like I said, these are my best shots. But that's what you want to find, is you want to find that balance of all the interesting stuff that's happening behind the flower, all right? And then you're placing the flower against that interesting light, all right? So it becomes about the light, not necessarily about the flower. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, and then just, you know, line it up the best you can. Minor adjustments will change the look of the image completely. Excuse me. You know, and even, you know, try rotating the flower if you can. I try not to do any damage to the flowers, all right, so that others can enjoy it as well. So I don't like manhandling the flowers too much, but you have some flexibility along the stem to manipulate those flowers, so you can get something interesting, you know. And of course, I look for specimens that are pretty, but, you know, it's to taste, all right? So those are my tips for this kind of photography. Anybody else?
See, that's useful. That, I mean, both those were but the idea, I would have never guessed using 200 ISO or 100 ISO. I would think, well, anyway, so now I'm
Right, yeah.
Now I have a better shot at the first shot.
Yeah. So if you look at this particular image, the settings are directly above me. I'm shooting at ISO 100. I am, pretty not full open. Well, it might be a full open on this particular lens. It's an older lens that I had that has since broken. Oh my God, I got a story about that one. But it's a shutter speed of 1/1000th of a second. Why? Because I'm shooting into the sun. You know, and even there, that background is blowing out. You know, um, so all right, and this was taken back in when was this taken? 2018. Okay, 2018. So I guess not too long ago. All right, but software has gotten better in recovering shadows. Lightroom, Photoshop, Adobe Camera Raw. So if I were to do this again, I would probably, oh, actually I do have one that's a little bit, all right, more underexposed. Okay, let's see. What can I do with this? I haven't visited these in a while. All right, bring up my shadows, bring down my highlights. Yeah, my background's all not all that great. Texture. Yeah. Not really all that great, but it's something, worth experimenting. All right. The key thing is watch your background. Watch your background because that's where the interest lies. All right. Okay.
I have a couple of questions related to everything you're saying about pointing your camera in the sun, and all the warnings. And I know that, so it'd be just like me to, burn it out and not realize it. So when you're snapping these, like these pictures right here, you're not on a tripod or anything.
No.
You're just going up, you're taking a picture and pulling it
Yeah,
down.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The flower photos I do handheld simply because there's too many moving parts. There's the sun that I have to line up against. There's my background, whatever bushes or trees that are usually anything about 40-50 feet away is good. If you can get something that you can that is allowing enough of the sun to poke through. All right. So like some trees have very sparse leaves that really allow the sun to really shine through them. That's the kind of background you want. All right. Otherwise, if you can get a bush that's a good 10-15 feet away, that's an alternative. All right. But the flower is literally going to be at arm's distance away from you. Okay. Because you're going to be, it's a subject. So you want to kind of fill the frame up with the subject. Okay. But because when you're taking these photos, there's a lot of experimentation going on. All right. As you're looking through the viewfinder, you want to see how it interacts with not only the background, but with the light coming through the background. All right. Because that's the key. That's the key part is how it interacts with that light coming through, filtering through the background. All right. Not evident in these shots. These shots are they have never seen light of day until now. All right. But by hand holding, it allows you to move yourself in relation to the sun, move yourself in relation to the background, and then move the flower in relation to the camera and the background and all that good stuff. So there's way too many moving parts to be stationary on a tripod. So if you want to pull your hair out, try doing it on a tripod.
No, my main concern is, like you said, frying sensors and all that. that concerns me, that I might do something like that, just
Yeah.
pointing it at the sun too.
So, all right. So the other thing that works in the favor here with the flower photos as compared to doing a solar eclipse, in a solar eclipse, you're focusing on the sun. In a flower shot, you're focusing on the flower. All right. So what happens is anything behind the flower is being thrown out of focus. So that means all that bright light coming from the sun down the lens is out of focus. So it's not, coming into that pinpoint, that's going to cause damage, right? It's a lot softer. So you're mitigating some of that harm that can be done. All right. But you still don't want to be directly into that kind of light, because obviously the heat that's generated is going to cause damage. All right. In particular, if your lens elements overheat, there's a lot of oils within the lens. All right. You don't want that evaporating and, possibly causing damage down the road. Okay. So you want to mitigate any kind of heat buildup. So that's another reason why I'll do it handheld, is because I can bring the camera up, do all my manipulating, click, click, and then take it down so it's no longer pointing in that direction. So, okay.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Any other questions in regards to shooting towards the sun, shooting at the sun? Anything? Okay. Well, that pretty much concludes my presentation on solar eclipses. All right. If you do decide to shoot the solar eclipse, definitely share them. Or if you decide
do
to,
some sunsets and some flowers, so, using that same, what we were just talking about,
yeah.
with the light and the settings, so, I like to take, I can't get a good sunset or sunrise, I should say. So I have
All
to
right.
see-
Well, sunsets and sunrises are a completely different animal.
Oh,
You
okay.
don't need any kind of filter for those, because what's happening is the Earth's atmosphere is going to be your filter. Right? The problem with sunrises and sunsets is more of a contrast issue, because you either expose for the for the light, or you expose for the shadow. All right. If you expose for the light, your shadow goes black. If you expose for the shadow, your light gets washed out and you lose all those, vibrant colors. All right. So a lot of times, what people will do is they'll use a variable gradient. I don't know if you've ever seen those. Let me see
Yes,
if.
like from like 1 to 10?
No. A variable. All right. In Lightroom, you have your gradient filter,
Yeah.
where it goes from really dark to nothing. A variable gradient filter is the analog version of that, where it's dark at the top and it kind of fades off and blends down to nothing. All right, let me pull up. Where are we? Gradient ND filter. All right, here we go. These things here. All right. Where it's dark at the top and it lightens off. All right. So what that allows the camera to do is literally cut out some of the exposure in the bright areas of the sky, while not disturbing any of the exposure of the land. So where you get in a normal unfiltered shot, you'll get a wide contrast between your shadows and your lights. Okay. What this does is it brings the lights down a little bit closer to your darks. Okay. So now you can shift everything back this way. All right. And then you have a little bit of leeway in post-production. I don't know if that made sense. All right. But so in essence, you can expose for the ground, and the filter is going to drop the exposure for the sky. So
You need another set for the sunsets?
well, you can use these for sunsets. So
That was a joke.
yeah,
Turn 'em
but
over, right?
oh, I gotcha. Yeah, I'm slow that way. Okay, took me a second. But no, these are great if you do any kind of landscape photography. These are good because it you know, if you've ever done any kind of landscape work, you know, if your sky is bright, you're going to get a very distinct difference in exposure between the sky and the ground. And often that's, you're either blowing out your sky or you're underexposing your ground. And then you have to kind of find that middle ground in order to be able to work it in post-production. Well, these filters, you know, kind of closes that gap, that contrast gap, and allows you to work a little bit more effectively. Okay. There are arguments for the use, and, you know, do you really need these kind of filters? All right. Like I mentioned earlier, the software has gotten really, really, really good at controlling exposure in post-production. We're able to pull out a lot more detail than we were able to, you know, 5 years ago. Okay, you've seen me, you know, work some images where, you know, something looks extremely dark, and then we just pull up the shadows and like, boom, all that detail just magically comes forward. So a lot of people say, well, you know, with the technology, we don't need these filters anymore because we can use the digital equivalent of these filters. All right, we have the graduated filter on, you know, Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw, where we just drag from the top down and magically, you know, we can control the exposure that way. Okay, and then some people say, well, if you can get it a little bit closer, if you can narrow that gap in the field, then you can get more from your digital file in post-production. And there is truth to that, right? When you start overexposing a sky, you start losing saturation. Okay. The same thing goes with the shadow side, all right? When you start going too dark, you start losing the color, the color quality, the color fidelity. That's the word. Okay, you start losing color fidelity, and it becomes much harder to pull it out without getting some kind of color aberrations in your work, or color shifts that, you know, are just going wonky. Because if we think about it, our color sensors have a hard time with certain parts of the color spectrum. All right, it has a hard time with blues. It has a hard time with reds. All right, especially very saturated reds. All right, if you ever, you know, taken flowers, photos of roses, okay, and you've opened them up, sometimes you'll see the reds are just kind of all mushed and oversaturated and look terrible. All right, it's because the camera has a hard time with, you know, the extreme ends of the color spectrums. Okay, that's why if you look at the sensors, there's more green pixels that, get picked up than red and the blue. All right. This has a physical effect on our images. So if we can narrow that contrast, we are preserving a lot more color fidelity in our files natively on the scene in the field, which makes editing easier. Okay, and you can get, richer colors that way in your post-production. All right, so there are benefits to that. Okay, but like I said, the other camp says, well, the majority, if you shoot with the understanding of certain certain disabilities of the camera, all right, and you shoot, either you do a bracketed exposure where you shoot one for the sky and one for the ground and then combine them, that alleviates the problem. You don't need the filter, just shoot and compensate for that lack of a filter. Okay, or find the exposure that kind of cuts the midpoint in order to preserve just enough detail in the shadows and just enough detail in the highlights. All right, and I do that a lot with my photography. I'll find that middle ground that allows me to push a little bit more on either end. So, pros and cons. All right, I think I may have blown some brain cells on that one. I'm sorry. I try not to, but it's in my nature. So, all right. But that was a great question. That really was. So, all right. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Next week, nothing.
Yeah, the following week.
Following week, yeah. And I think we have a month coming up that's got 5 weeks, so I'll schedule a Patreon only session for you guys. So if you want something to dive really deep into for, if you're a Patreon member, hit me up, send me a little message, we'll do a deep dive. Okay. Alrighty, guys. Once again, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you learned a little something. Go out there and shoot stuff. All right, guys. Be safe. Take care.
Good night.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.